need to talk about chocolate. This, I'm afraid to say, is not chocolate. This is chocolate. And we're going to tell the story of chocolate through the eyes of Malinche, a beautiful Mayan. And this is really the foundation story of chocolate. And we're going to take you through one of the most incredible stories that, is in history. So Malinche lived in the Amazonian wilderness, and she would have grown to worship chocolate like this and value the beans as a kind of currency. But her beauty was spread far and wide, and people from other villages came to see her. And this has an unfortunate consequence, because the Aztecs learn of her beauty, and one day they come and raid her village and kill her parents and seize her and take her. And the reason they did this is because they wished to sacrifice the most beautiful male or female to their gods. And they believed that human sacrifice, the blood from human sacrifice, replenished the sun. Because when the sun rose in the morning, it was blood red, and when it descended in the evening, it was blood red. And they felt that the sun had a fight with the jaguar of the night, and it lost blood. And it was only through the replenishment of human blood that the sun rose in the morning. So it was a really important aspect of their religion that they needed sacrificial victims. And Malinche, because she was so beautiful, was the chosen victim for this sacrifice. Now, some quirk of fate, and perhaps it was because she was so beautiful, they didn't sacrifice her, and she became a slave, and she lived among the Aztecs. And this is really important because she learnt the language. So she had a translation between Mayan and Aztec. And as we go through the story, this will become very important. Now, she lived near the river of Tabasco, and she would have been one of the first to see these moving mountains arrive on the shores of Tabasco. And out of those moving mountains descended men in shining steel. Now, of course, she didn't know it was steel at the time. They had gunpowder and they rode enormous beasts. And those beasts were horses, and she'd never seen a horse before. And it so happened that her beauty was so amazing that Cortes, the leader of the Spanish that had descended, the Spanish conquistadors, fell in love with her, and they had a relationship. And their child becomes the first child of these two civilizations that have never seen each other before or even knew of their existence. So Malinche would have taught Cortes all the secrets of chocolate. She would have shown him the trees and the beautiful orchid flowers. She would have explained to him that they're fertilized by beautiful hummingbirds, and that he would have seen the iridescence of the hummingbird as it fertilized the cocoa pod. Now, of course, in actual fact, it's a mosquito, but for our story, we'll use the idea of the food of the gods being fertilized, the flower, by a beautiful hummingbird. And you can imagine that Cortes must have felt he was in paradise, because he would have cut out the cocoa pod and drunk its juice, and its juice tastes of a combination of lychee and banana. It's like the drink of the gods. It's a beautiful, beautiful drink. He would have then seen the white beans and collected them, and Malinche would have explained that they're worth their weight in gold. You could marry, you could buy chicken, you could buy food. It was literally a currency. So when they say that money doesn't grow on trees, they're wrong, because it does, and it happens in the Amazon. So through this journey between Cortes and Malinche, it so happens that she picks up Spanish. And so for the first time, we have a translation between Spanish and Aztec. And this obviously was to have massive consequences, because when Cortes asked the Aztecs if they had gold, And unfortunately, the Aztecs answered, yes, we have lots of gold. The story begins to unfold in one of the most tragic stories, in history. Of course, Cortes then proceeds to go and find this gold, and he goes towards and he climbs the mountains, aided by Malinche, and he goes to the capital city of Montezuma, which is Tezcatlipan. Now, if you can imagine a lake with beautiful pyramids in it, a bit like Venice, but with pyramids. Of course, the Spanish felt they'd arrived in El Dorado. This was beyond their expectations, and they were given chocolate, they were given gold, they were given chocolate in gold cups, and they were also given concubines. So this was El Dorado. They were in paradise. And it's at this point that Cortes makes a very fateful decision, and I think it's driven by his lust for gold, and I think it's also driven by Malinche's desire for revenge. Because don't forget, as we said at the beginning of the story, she was a slave and she was at risk of being sacrificed to their gods. So she was out for revenge. And that Cortes makes a decision to kidnap Montezuma. And at this point, the world history changes. So Montezuma is now a captive, and through some quirk of fate, they try and communicate with the Spanish king and ask that this rogue individual, Cortes, is removed, and a relief army is actually sent. And we have this weird quirk of history where it's actually Spanish on Spanish, and the Aztecs have allied with the Spanish king. But Cortes was smart. He caught the Spanish army unguarded, and he took the control of them. But it was while he was away that I think his commander, his second in command, panicked, and we have a tragic slaughter of the Aztecs. And so you can see that the whole thing is beginning to unravel in a complete catastrophe. Cortes returns, realizes the situation is unstable, tries to escape, and one night they try and escape in boats and along the Escapades. The Aztec warriors discover that, and at this point, the Spanish, laden with gold, are going to sink through the lake, and he loses most of his army. A normal individual at this point would say, I've got gold, I've got chocolate, I've had an amazing experience, I've had enough. Cortes and Malinche at this point were not in the normal realm of human emotion. Cortes wanted the utter destruction. And I think at this point he had a pathological moment. And I think Malinche wanted revenge. And she built an alliance of the locals around the lake. And through a combination of direct attacks and through building boats, they then destroy this beautiful capital, this Venice of Mexico. And they take each pyramid down brick by brick, fill in the canals. The Aztecs every night would take the bricks away, try to reestablish the canals, and this battle went on until the last Aztec soldier died. Really, this is why we don't know much about chocolate. This is why we call these things chocolate, because we lost that chocolate culture that was so important to Malinche. Now, she, as I said, had children, and these children are now part of the civilization of South America. And she also then leaves with Cortes and brings and introduces chocolate to Europe. And we'll pick up the story of how chocolate arrived in Europe, and it arrived with the belief that it was a powerful aphrodisiac. And that's a story for next time, and we'll pick that up as we go along. But I just want to give you this extraordinary sense of adventure that Cortes had traveling all the way from Europe and arriving at this land and discovering a civilization that nobody had ever even heard of. So that is chocolate. This is not chocolate.